Hello from Turismo de Tenerife. We want to welcome you today to this webinar of the First International Congress of Whale Watching. I want to thank all the speakers. I give the floor to Mar Ramirez.
Muchas gracias, Sara.
Thank you very much, Sara. We are here again another week, and this is a very complete week. We have the support of Turismo de Tenerife. We want to discover the world. And we are here to continue with the first International Congress of Whale Watching. We stay today in Europe. Europe has some of the most important opportunities to see whales. And we have the privilege to have here today 4 people interested in whale watching. From Azores, from Pico Island, we welcome Susana SeaU. He's a marine biologist. He's well informed of sperm whales. He works with sperm whales. Even her doctoral thesis was about sperm whales, and he's very passionate about whales and marine turtles, of course. He also works as whale watcher, one of the pioneering companies in the Azores Islands, and one of the very first companies, Espacio Talasa. This company is located in a historical village. At the beginning, this location was a whale village, but after some years, this village has become a very tourist village, and we are very happy to have her with us today. Welcome. Thank you very much. Secondly, we have 2 important experts in Norway, in the Arctic waters. Here, Mario Acquarone and Giovanna. They work with cetaceans. Mario works at the European Cetacean Society in Norway, and he's also an expedition leader at Hurtigruten. Hurtigruten is a Norwegian company specializing in cruisers, and he shows Arctic cetaceans. He also explains everything about cetaceans to tourists, and he has also prepared and write a guide for tour operators. And he's a good example of how conservation and tourism can contribute together to sustainable development. Hello, Mario. Welcome. He's going to do the presentation, Giovanna, together with Mario. Giovanna Bersela is also a researcher specialized in cetaceans too, very linked to Norway. She's working at the moment at the Arctic University of Norway. She's also specialized in whales sounds. Hello, Giovanna. And finally, we come back to Spain, to Spanish waters, and we go to the Biscay Bay. We have here Gorka Ocio. He's a passionate guide, a nature guide, and he has also create Ver Ballenas, a company specialized in whale watching in the Biscay Bay.
Pero también ahí tiene unos cómplices muy buenos, que es la empresa Ver Ballenas. Ver Ballenas, aparte de sensibilizar y
These companies
también
wants to
nos acompañan además con un compromiso muy alto, con mucha ética, con la población local, con los empresarios locales.
Sensitize and educate people about whale watching. It is a very successful company, and this company is overbooked even before the season actually starts. And Gorka is responsible of this company, as I already said, and he's going to explain us why whale watching is a booming company. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Now, after all these presentations, we are going to give the floor to Susana Simiao.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a second. Okay, I hope everybody can see well. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting us for this talk. On behalf of Spastalasa, of course, thank you everyone for being here. And let me tell you a little bit about what we do in this company. So for those of you that don't know where the Azores are, we are a small archipelago in the middle of the North Atlantic. Some of our islands are actually closer to America, some are closer to Europe. But it's definitely one of the best places in the world to go whale watching. Pico is located in the central group of the archipelago, so we are the southernmost island of all the islands in the central group. It's 9 islands in total, and this is the island of Pico, and this is where we are. Spastalasa, it's located in Lash, like Mar already talked about a little bit. It's funny because some of the other presentations you told a little bit about protected areas, and well, but there's actually no protected areas here in at least marine protected areas close to Pico. So the area that we can actually observe these whales and dolphins, it's not a protected area, so it's quite incredible that we can see so much and so many different species. Just in this area, we are usually in the south coast of Pico, but sometimes we also go in the channel northeast between Pico and São Jorge. So just to tell you where we are located. Of course, whaling was very important here in the Azores. There's a strong whaling culture that cannot be forgotten because it was actually used as a baseline to start whale watching in the Azores. And whaling here was done mostly on sperm whales, los cachalotes. So these were the whales that were being hunted here in a very traditional way, and they were hunted mostly until 1984, although the last 3 were hunted in 1987. So recently, it's very recent in time, actually, this activity. But basically how it worked was that there were people on land spotting the animals with binoculars, and they were telling the whalers where they had to go, and the whalers were using very small wooden rowing boats, like you see in the images, to hunt these whales. So when the whale watching began 2 years after whaling stopped, actually the idea was to use these resources that were used during whaling times, but not to go whale and dolphin watching instead. And in fact, Spastalasa, it's one of the first companies, the first company of the Azores to be created, with Serge Vialel, the owner, when he arrived here in the Azores, and he was dazzled by the fact that we could do whale watching this way here. Unfortunately, as most of you probably know, Serge passed away last year, so he cannot be here with us at the moment. But it's amazing what he has done. To give you an idea of the species we see, of course, there's almost 90 species of cetaceans spread out all around the world. Some are quite specific. You can only see them in certain places. We don't have any exclusive species in the Azores, but we do have 28 different species that have been cited. And of course, the most important, the iconic species of the Azores is the sperm whale. This is a whale that we can see here all year, even though we see them in bigger numbers in the summertime, because we see most of the times the groups of females with calves, and females usually prefer tropical, subtropical and temperate waters, while the big males, once they leave the mother's group, they are usually up north in Iceland, Norway, Canada, and we end up seeing a lot more of the females here, although we also see males. So this is so far the only resident species, whale species that we have here. But we also have dolphins too that we can see throughout the year, like the common dolphins, the bottlenose, rhesos, striped dolphins. And then depending on the time of the year that you come here, you can also see other things. For example, the baleen whales, which are very important in some areas because they are using those areas to mate. It's a reproductive area for them. Some areas where they forage, usually in the cold waters up north. Here in the Azores, this is just passing by for them. So they are usually passing in the springtime while they're migrating up north. Occasionally, we see them in autumn too, when they migrate back down, but we see them in bigger numbers closer to shore in the springtime. And actually, blue whales and fin whales are the species that we see more, although this year we had a lot of sightings of sei whales too, and of course the humpback whales. In the summer, we then see the tropical species. Don't forget the Azores are temperate waters, so in the summer the water gets really warm, and we have some of these tropical species showing up, like the pilot whales that you have in the Canary Islands. Eventually, even some of the same individuals that you see there come all the way here, and especially spotted dolphins, and also some beaked whales, which are usually mostly seen in the summertime. And of course, occasional species which are iconic all around the world, like orcas and false killer whales. We see them throughout the season. Okay, there's no specific time to come and see them. So to explain to you exactly where we go and how this works, we are located, like I said, in Lage, and we leave the harbor with the use of a lookout. So we have somebody inside that tower that you see in the image, spotting the animals with binoculars. It was a tower used during whaling times, and he tells us where we have to go. In this way, we can maximize the number of species that we see in the 3-hour trip while we are at sea. And we see a lot. I mean, as you can see here in this graph, very simply, it's just the last 10 years of sightings that we've had. Practically on every trip that we go out, we see dolphins, depending on the time of the year, different dolphins. We see a lot of sperm whales, some years better than others. Sometimes it has to do with the abundance of food, with other environmental factors that can affect the presence of these animals. The baleen whales, the numbers have increased a lot in the past few years, but also because our season is now starting to get a little bit longer with the increase of tourism here. We go out between March and November. And beaked whales also, like I said before, we see them, but unfortunately not very often. In terms of within the season, the animals that we see, well, of course, in March, April, May, that's the best time to come if you want to see the blue and the fin whales. And we have bigger numbers of sperm whales, which is the red line that you see in the summer months, but they are present all around the year. We also see a lot more beaked whales in the summer, and then the dolphins throughout the season. In terms of the legislation, well, we don't have any protected areas, like I told you, any marine protected areas close to shore here in Pico, because there are some a bit more offshore in the sea mountains, in the sea banks, because these are volcanic islands. Close to shore, we don't have that. And only 10 years after whale watching began, was there the need to create a legislation to discipline the cetaceans observation activities using platforms like the boats that we use. So this was actually a little bit late after the whale watching actually began, but it works quite well. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because you have them here in the slides and you can always go back because I know this will be available online. But like in most areas in the world where the whale watching is done in a restrictive way, the rules are quite similar all around. There's a rule to approach the animals, if you should approach them or not, given the behavior that they are exhibiting, how long you should stay with the animals once you approach them. And then there's also specific rules for sperm whales in this law, because, like I said, they are the iconic whale of the Azores. And there's also an important article about swimming with dolphins, because that's also an activity that you can do in the Azores. But I want to make sure that you know that we don't do that activity here at Pastalasa, because well, we've noticed that it's similarly to the whale watching, it's an activity that has an impact in the animals. And we believe, well, Serge believed, I think in a good way, that it was starting to be a little bit too negative, the impact that it had on the animals. So we actually stopped this activity 3 years ago. We can go into more details about that later on if you want. You can ask me questions about that, but Serge also has an open letter on the website explaining the reasons why we stopped this activity. What do we do here on the boats? Well, we try to explain a little bit about the biology of the animals to people. And then on the boat, it's actually, we use very small boats. The whale watching here done by us, it's also almost very traditional. We don't have those big boats that we see in some places of the world, like one whale watching trip with 300 people. Well, our boats only fit 12. So we actually prefer to have the policy of less people, but with the more responsible kind of tourism than the mass tourism that occurs in some areas of the world. So it's also very important to know that even if there is a legislation, even if we try to do our best, of course, everybody makes mistakes, but it's very important to have a specific type of client that goes out with us. We prefer to have only one person instead of 100 that don't really know what they're going into. There's all sorts of wildlife that you can see in the Azores as well. Of course, the birds, and sometimes the birds help us a lot to find dolphins, especially this one, the Cory shearwater. The Azores have the largest colony in the world of these birds. They come here every summer to nest, but during the day they are feeding on fish that the dolphins gather. So in a cloudy day, or if it's raining on land, and the lookout cannot see anything, sometimes we can use the birds also to find dolphins outside. We also have sea turtles. There's only 7 species in the world, and 6 of them have been seen in the Azores. We've seen 5 already. We're just missing 1. But the one we see more, it's the loggerhead sea turtle. And of course, all sorts of wildlife, lots of fish, and, well, Portuguese men of war, very dangerous, but they are the food of sea turtles, so it's good that we have them here as well. What do we try to do to minimize our impact in the environment a bit here at Thalassa is to go beyond just the activity of whale watching. And this is probably one of the most important things that the message should pass to the new companies that are being created all around the world. Here in the Azores, you cannot have a new company anymore because you need a license for that. And here the licenses are already given. So if you want to open a company here, you have to buy the license from somebody. So that's good. That's also a good measure. But it's also important to try to do this in the best way possible. We do that by trying to involve the local community in this, especially children. We provide educational activities for them. So basically, every time that they go out at sea with us to see the whales, to see the dolphins, they don't pay as much money as a tourist. So in return, we ask them for something back. We have the coastal platform here of Lage that sometimes accumulates a lot of trash that the ocean brings in. So we tell the kids to go and clean the trash. So that's a good measure for them to become more aware of the environmental problem of plastic nowadays. Also from the other islands, not just Pico, but then they do other things instead. The sea turtles, we have a project in which we collaborate with the research group in Florida because the loggerhead sea turtles are actually coming from there. So this allows us to realize how many sea turtles are around, more or less, because of course we don't tag every single turtle that we see, but we do record them. And how much they have grown in the meantime if we recapture them, because we do have some recaptures, and also where they end up after being tagged by us, because we caught them here in the south coast of Pico, but some of them were recaptured in Canada or Florida. So that's actually pretty cool because you can see at least how long they took to get there and how far they traveled. The photo identification projects that we are involved in are quite a few, even though we also do the photo identification of the sperm whales. We've only started to do this on a more regular basis in 2008. But there is somebody based here in the other island in Fayal, Lisa Steiner. She's watching, so thank you, Lisa, for that. She's been doing research on the sperm whale since 1988. So she's the one that tells us that the whales we see here are coming back every single year on the individual level. We're sometimes seeing the same groups over a period of 3 or 4 months in the season. And even when they disappear in the winter, we know that they come back next year. So that's really good. And some of them go all the way to the Canary Islands. So we've discovered exactly like how big their home ranges are, the reproductive rate. So all of that, which is very important to understand these populations a little bit better. Also with the blue whales, we work with the Mingan Island cetacean studies. With the Riso dolphins, we collaborate with the Nova Atlantis, the Riso project. So we are involved with quite a few research groups. Because we have an impact in the environment, we try to reduce that by giving money to the biggest environmental organization in Portugal, Huercus. They use the money that we give them, well, that the clients pay to go whale watching in the Azores, to plant trees in the mainland Portugal, where it's an area that's always devastated by fires. So of course, it's important to try to reduce a little bit the impact that we have. It's not a lot, but it's something. And we are also going to start participating soon in a local project, not because of the fires. Luckily in the Azores, it rains a lot. So we don't have a lot of forest fires here, but there's a lot of invasive plants. So the project that's going to start hopefully soon is to clear out the areas full of invasive plants and replant endemic plants instead. So just some pictures of this. And yeah, the message is this. It's very clear, it's very simple. I'm trying not to take too long. Sorry if I talk too fast. I would stay here for another 2 hours talking if you want. But the message is very clear. We need to protect the environment. If we want to continue to see these whales in the future, we need to not just create laws and enforce them and have a way of enforcing them, but also to respect the environment. And you can do this by training the people that are going out, watching these animals. Luckily, some of our skippers have 20 years of experience, so they are quite respectful of the behavior of the animals. But not everybody is like that. So that's the message that we want to pass. Yeah, so we need to try to do everything a little bit better. We all need to try to protect the environment in the best way that we can. So yeah, well, welcome aboard. Now you know where we are, and if you want to visit us, you are more than welcome. So thank you very much, everyone.
Obrigada, Susana. Bueno, hemos tenido una inmersión de lleno en el Atlántico, en las aguas que bañan las Islas Azores.
Azores waters. I will just mention two ideas. First of all, the richness of cetaceans, 28 species, and for a long period, from April to October. This is one of the most important places in the world for whale watching. And their work is very important. Less people and more protection to a better preservation of the environment, to minimize the human impact on the environment. And I think this could be a good example for other companies. Thank you very much, Susana, for your presentation. And Mario, Giovanna, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Mar. I would like to thank the organizers and also for letting us speak here about whale watching in northern Norway in the winter, which is a very peculiar place and a very peculiar time. And we are talking about being north of the Arctic Circle. I hope that Javier or Bacha are going to put the presentation on. If I don't see it on, but yes, thank you. So if you go on the next slide, please. Now this is to set the scene. There are many other places to do whale watching and times in Norway, but when we talk about whale watching in Norway, we're talking about sperm whales out of Andenes, which is in the left end of this oval, red oval on the left map. But now we're talking about the winter, and we're talking about humpbacks and killer whales that are following the herring. So we are talking about whales that are following a resource that is a very movable resource. In the picture on the left, in the figure on the left, you see that there is a light blue oval. This light blue oval describes the cycle of the Norwegian spring spawning herring, and this is what these whales are following. So the spring spawning herring, where you see the letter S, are spawning, so laying their eggs along the west of Norway. And then in the winter, they are there where there is a W along the west, northwest, along the northeast coast of Norway. So by Tromsø, where we are, Joanna and I. It's a very big resource. It's what's it called? Marine Stewardship Council approved fisheries. And the interesting part is some of these age classes of herring go into the fjords. And in the 90s, they were coming in a fjord called Tisfjord, that is further south in Tromsø. And that was the first adventure of whale watching, orca watching, and swimming with orcas in Norway. But by the end of the 90s, these wintering herring, these age classes had been exhausted. So they'd either died naturally or they'd been fished. And this industry of whale watching actually kind of died out. So we jump in 2013, where some year classes of Norwegian spring spawning herring adopted what is called the Kalfjord Vengsøyfjord area, which is what I put as K on the bigger map, a larger scale map. And this is by the city of Tromsø, very, very close to town. And this gave rise to an explosion in the whale watching activity. And Joanna will quantify this later. She will give you the numbers. And this is also due to the fact that at practically at the same time as the whales, we have a pre-existent industry of aurora watching or northern light watching. And the whales stayed into this area, this K area, up about the winter 2017, where the fish actually disappeared from those fjords. And the following winter, the whales actually appeared in the area that is called S, which is where they are now. So the last couple of winters, they have been up there by what is called the Skjervøy. We're talking about 500, 600 humpback whales and an unknown number of orcas that are visiting the fjords, and they stay in the area for 4 to 6 weeks before going down to the Azores to visit Susanna and her colleagues, and then maybe down over even down to the Caribbean, and then coming back up. Now, if we go to the next slide, pardon me. Yes, we have a few herring stakeholders. The stakeholders can be the whales, of course, killer and humpbacks, but we also have the fishermen. In the top left corner, we have a typical purse seiner. And they act also a little bit as a dinner bell for whales. And this means that the whale watching also is attracted to the herring fishermen, because the herring fishermen are actually a place with, they also use floodlights, and there are very interesting lights and light situation. You might have seen some of the pictures around these purse seiners. You see in the top, in the bottom left picture, you see that there are herring. Herring is stunned and is floating about. There are also myriads of birds around there. The herring is also depleting the oxygen in the fjords. So the fish farms that you see in the top right picture can have problems, and the fish farmers, fish farming is also another big industry up in northern Norway, is not very happy about having whales around, but especially not having herring around. So they are actually quite happy that there are fishermen. And this is, of course, a little bit of a problem for everything that is happening up here. But if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. We can see that there has been a very quick raise in the number and types of vessels that are going out for looking at the whales. Now, all of these pictures are with nice and bright light. If you consider that is a polar night, because we are not very very distant from the North Pole. We are actually halfway between the polar circle and the North Pole. So it's actually quite dark, but we see that we have larger vessels, like the top left whale watching boat that is usually in the summer operating in Svalbard. It's called Polar Girl, and is coming down to Tromsø for the winter. And you go down to very small vessels like kayaks that also paddle in between killer whales and humpback whales. A special word is for the private boats, like the top right. Now, this private boat was about 5 to 6 meters away from a humpback whale. They are very difficult to regulate, and this is one of the images that makes you cringe a little bit. And then also in the bottom right, in between all those birds, you can see that there is a line of yellow buoys. This is a net from a purse seiner, and you have a boat on the right of it that is very close to the net. So coming close to industrial fishing equipment under activity, which is a very dangerous thing to do. And this is why we thought, I mean, these are some of the reasons why we thought that the regulating whale watching, or at least making an industry self-regulation, would have been a good idea. Next slide, please. So lastly, there are quite a few actors that are doing in-water activities. It's of course an excitement. You have a polar night, you have maybe the auroras, but there is a big problem with visibility, with keeping the proximity to the boat of the actual swimmers that are dark, in a dark background in the polar night. And of course, this causes a problem with safety and special issues with safety. Normally, the boats are getting close also to the fishing boats, and diving at times also very close to the fishing gear, which can actually piss off quite a lot the fishermen. Next slide, please. So to bring it all together, before I pass the word to Giovanna, it has been a Klondike situation up here. It's stunning, it's unique, and it is an added value for the local tourism industry, because the aurora is great. But you can see in this image here that we have like at least 3 different types of vessels, from the big ones to the kayaks and a little private vessel there. You have the orcas. I don't remember if there was any humpbacks around, but they are usually also humpbacks in pods. But regulating this is difficult because of the different kinds of vessels and different types of vessel, and also because there are a lot of small private vessels that join the professional operators. We have challenges with the weather. It's a very exposed coast, and therefore safety is quite a high priority. Law enforcement is practically non-existent, and is mostly relating to fishery and fishing. And of course, one of the big issues here is that the conditions are very volatile. The whales follow the herring, and if the herring don't come in the fjord, the industry may collapse in no time. And with this, I thank you, and unfortunately I'll have to go and catch a plane, and I'll leave the floor to Giovanna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mario. Have a safe trip.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, everybody else.
Please, Giovanna.
Thanks. So yes, I will continue and comment on some of the issues that Mario has already mentioned. So I've been mainly researching the tourist part of whale watching. I work for a School of Business and Economics, so my focus has been on how tourism has developed based on whales. So this diagram shows you the increase of tourism from abroad in Tromsø. And as you can see, the number of the tourists coming from abroad, that's the gray line, goes up very much, starting from 2011, 2012. And as Mario said, the reason for this is the combination of Northern Lights tourists and whale watching. So Northern Lights tourists, I mean, Northern Lights were here already before, but there was a combination of a very successful, famous BBC documentary in 2007, 2008. Then there was the NASA who came out with information that Northern Lights would have been very easy to observe from 2011 for a few years. So, and finally, in this time, we started to see that many people could use digital cameras, and it was very easy, quite easy actually, to take extremely good pictures of Northern Lights, so that these pictures were going around on social media and create very much attention to Tromsø. And then what happened is that from 2011, 12, and 13, we had the whales. So the whales arrived, as Mario said, following the herrings. And based on the official companies that belong to the Destination Management Organization, we can see that in 2013, there were only 5 official whale watching companies. The year after, there were 9, and the year after, there were 13. And these are only the official companies belonging to the Destination Management Organization. In addition to this, we had quite a lot of other companies, and lately also coming from abroad. And then, of course, unofficial companies, and then the private people that could go out in the sea, observing the whales, swimming, or from boats, or from kayak, and so on. So we can say that the whale watching has been really booming. There was a real explosion in these years. And as we know, explosion can be dangerous. So if we look at the next slide, please, we can see that this phenomenon of Northern Lights combined with whale watching attract many tourists. In addition to the local people, came many journalists and many photographers. And this contributed to a situation where, as Mario has shown also in some of his pictures, there were extremely many people around these animals that were here to feed. So in quite critically important moment for their life. So another problem that arose is that because also of the digital pictures and the social media, they were created quite unrealistic expectations in the tourist. So both the official marketing channels and the private people sharing their pictures on Facebook, for example, they created quite uncritical presentation of what to expect when you come here, for example, as a tourist. So that you can find on Facebook, for example, many pictures of people being really too close to the whales. And these are just pictures that go around the world and contribute to create these expectations. But the two debates that have been more critical, actually, they are about the swimming with whales activity and the debate whether should we have guidelines, are guidelines enough, or should we have governmental regulation, so law enforcement. So these have been actually the two main issues. So if we take the next slide, please. Here is just a summary of the challenges that we have experienced in these years here in Northern Norway. And please note that when I wrote the high north and as the far west, these are not my words. So while doing my research, when I talk with operators or with people just going out in the sea to watch the waves, they use terms like cowboys. There are cowboys here, there are pirates here, there are people who do not follow the good practice and the rules. Of course, they don't use these words when they refer to themselves, but when they describe what the other people do. So if you click once, you will see that should appear something here. Yes. So this is what happened with regard to guidelines. There was a set of guidelines already from 2007, and they were developed by Ocean Sounds, that was born as a company and is now an NGO, and I'm very proud to be part of it. And then this was the first set of guidelines regulating whale watching in northern Norway at the destination level. And Ocean Sounds was invited to Tromsø to present these guidelines at the very beginning of the phenomenon. Still, when we, Mario and I and other people, were invited from the destination management organization to speak to the operators, to give some information, some knowledge about whales and whale watching, we noticed that they were asking for regulations, they were asking for guidelines. So in collaboration with Ocean Sounds and several other organizations that I will tell you more about in a little while, we developed a new set of guidelines in 2015. And these are the so-called Visit Tromsø guidelines. And then the year after, the operators belonging to a commercial network came together and developed a third set of guidelines. So these are the three sets of guidelines that we have now in Northern Norway. If we see next slide, I will show you the posters of these three guidelines. We have the one from 2007 from Ocean Sounds, then we have the Visit Tromsø guidelines in the middle, and the Norway guidelines on the right. And so one could wonder, what is the difference? Why do we have three sets of guidelines? And that's a very, very good questions, I think. But what I think it's interesting to note here is, if you think back about the two debates that we had in these years, one was about swimming. The whale watching guidelines by Ocean Sound, they don't show in this poster swimming activities, but Ocean Sounds has been always against swimming activities. When we developed Visit Tromsø whale watching guidelines, we consider this, and we discourage any kind of swimming activities, so that we decided to put a big red cross when we prepared this poster on swimming activities. On the right side, it's the guidelines prepared by the commercial actors. And here you can see that with regard to orcas, they decided to regulate the activity, not to ban that. So they regulate swimming with orcas, but they are against any other kind of swimming activities, as you can see in the other picture here. So there are a bit different positions about swimming activities, and I will tell you more about these activities later on. When it comes to the intention, why were these guidelines prepared? I am personally involved in the first two sets of guidelines, so I can explain the intention back these guidelines. I cannot explain you the intention back to the third set of guidelines. Both Ocean Sounds and Visit Tromsø, so these first two sets of guidelines, were prepared with the idea that we were waiting for governmental regulations. While we were waiting, as we assumed the process to be quite long, we could have some not compulsory code of conduct. So our intention was to have something that the operators could use and also the private people could use while we were waiting for the regulations. So we can go to the next slide now, please. Here is the Visit Tromsø guidelines, and I wanted to show this because it's the set of guidelines that has been developed with quite a lot of organizations collaborating with each other, something that I view as particularly important. So we have the Visit Tromsø, so we have the commercial and public side here, but we have the local academia, that means was me and Mario, that at the time was working at the university. Then we have Ocean Sound, so the regional NGO, and then we have several different kind of organization and at the international level. Our intention when we involved all these organizations was to get some help in order to have high quality guidelines, but also to show the tourists, it was a kind of quality sample for the tourists. So if you choose the operators that follow these guidelines, you mean also that these guidelines are somehow viewed as good guidelines by all these international organizations. So if we go to next. Okay, so what's happening actually out in the ocean? So we can say that there are good days and bad days. Now, not to be very pessimistic, but I think it's important to focus on the bad days to see what's happening when things don't really go as we would like. Of course, because of the high number of boats, kayaks, and swimmers in the sea, it's there is a risk of injuries and kind of other problems with the whales that involve the whales, as well as risk for the humans. Something also that should not be underestimated is the climate that this situation can create among the operators. If we go to the next slide, you can see here an example from a Facebook group that is called Whales in the North, about a post describing a situation. So, of course, there were also posts describing beautiful situations, but there were quite a lot also describing boats going too close to the whales or too fast, or operators behaving in a bad way, or private people. So, so this is a kind of representative of the kind of climate that an unregulated situation can create among the operators. And what is interesting to note also from this particular post is that we have here a situation where one operator said that, okay, he has to go close to the animals because the customers ask for good photos. And this is back to the idea that marketing and social media can create expectations and create problems for the whales. And this kind of posts were followed by usually a huge number of comments, usually quite negative. So if we go to the next slide, here I list up some of the episodes, some of the critical episodes that happened in these years. So we had one episode where orcas were somehow chasing some two surfers that were joining a competition. We had one episode of a photographer that, as the title of the newspaper said, was nearly swallowed by a whale. We had one collision with a boat, a research boat and a whale. We had one feeding episode, so one company that will filmed while they were giving food to the whales. And then we had also one death, a tourist that had some medical condition from before, but who died while starting a swimming tour. So go to the next. And here is a bit what we try to do in order to arrive from the guidelines to the regulations, at least what I am aware of. All the things with the red stars, I've been involved in this, and there were letters to the government to ask for regulations. So we were very consistent in our message. In all these letters, what we kept on repeating is we need governmental regulations, we need law enforcement, and we are against swimming activities. What happened then in April 2019 is that the government proposed to regulate whale watching and asked to come with comments. And in 2019, it came out with the regulation about whale watching. If we see next slide, we can see that, as Mario has already mentioned, these regulations, if we see the next slide, please. Okay, you got the old presentation, but I can tell you, I can tell you anyway. what we see in the regulation that came out in December 2019 is that the government actually regulates swimming activities, because saying that they have observed many very dangerous behaviors of commercial operators that were way too close to fishing vessels. So this is what the regulation is actually regulating: the distance between swimmers and fishing vessels, and also the distance with the whale watching boats. And the regulation specify that in case that this kind of problems keep on occurring, so the government can change regulations and close the areas for all whale watching activities. So they identified swimming activities as the most dangerous based on some episodes, numerous episodes, as they said, and they try to regulate the interaction between whale watching, swimming, and fishing vessels. So the focus is clearly on fishing, I would say. But they mentioned that for all the rest, the guidelines developed by Visit Tromsø can be used. So just to close with a bit positive thing, maybe, is that what we can recommend if people want to come to Northern Norway to see the whales. The recommendation that I usually give when this question is asked to me is first to be informed about the regulations. There are probably suggestions that can be given in all the places. Get some information about regulations and the guidelines, then make the choice. I mean, follow them. It's quite absurd that you visit a place and you don't follow the local rules somehow, the local norms. And then the third suggestion that I give is that if you join a tour and you notice that the behavior is not in line with these guidelines, you should ask the guide first. But if there is something wrong, you should report this. So these are the three suggestions that we give. So information, choice, and report if necessary. So as Mario and I tried to tell you, the situation is quite complex, and we have been working quite hard through guidelines and letters to government. And the governmental regulations that we've seen now 1 year ago, we mean that they have some limitations. We are very happy that the government has done something, but still we think that something more should be done.
Thank you so much, Giovanna. Very interesting presentation. And bueno, yo voy a destacar muchas cosas interesantes.
I want to highlight some information. I will mention the ecosystem. Here in Norway, we don't have any ocean, any protective ocean. And even the industry related to whale watching can collapse in Norway, because the health of this ecosystem is very important. And it is important to highlight the effort of the researchers. And it is also important to respect and protect the environment and the animals. Only scuba diving, swimming, fishing, all these activities should be carried out in respect of the environment. I think it is very important, the professionalism of these NGOs, all these tourist organizations, and all the governmental legislation in order to whale watching becomes a sustainable activity. Thank you very much, Giovanna. And now I give the floor to Gorka Ocio. Good afternoon, everyone. Very interesting presentations. And with these last words of Mar, it is true. Everyone, as I always said, a lot of people live from the sea, and we have the same right to go to the sea than fishermen. So fishermen and us, we all need to protect cetaceans. We are not allowed to hurt them, so we all can live from the sea. In Euskadi, we here are not a traditional place for whale watching. For example, in Norway, this is a traditional place, but this is not the case in Euskadi. Or, for example, like in the Canary Island or in Tenerife. So we want to see our brothers, the cetaceans, free. And we don't have this tradition in Euskadi because cetaceans are not usually seen near our coast. They live far away from our coast. We started this activity, this adventure, and at the beginning we used a ferry from Santucci, Portsmouth, in the south of England. It was a 3-year cruise, and during this trip we saw the amazing fauna we had in the sea. We were not aware of the richness of animals we had in these areas, but this trip opened us our eyes and gave us the opportunity to start to watch these animals together with some NGOs. I was recording the different birds we had in the Biscay Bay, and that's why, thanks to this ferry, we decided that in less than 1 hour we saw a huge amount of cetacean, and we decided to create our company. Like in the unlike the Canary Island and the Azores, we must spend at least 2 hours or an hour and a half of navigation to see cetaceans. Sometimes we see dolphins, but we need to spend at least 1 hour and a half or 2 hours, even 3, 4, or 8 hours to see this animal. We need to navigate a lot. So we are almost the sole company to carry out these activities. And due to the amount of time we need to spend, we are obliged to see huge cetaceans, and that's why we need to navigate long hours to see them. And for this reason, as I already said, we are almost the sole company to carry out. There are companies which just go out to see some dolphins, but we want to see cetaceans. Now we are in the mobile era, and everything we watch from the coast and from the vessels, we can record it with the phone, and people can think maybe we have everything nearby, but that's not real. And we need to go out there. We are lucky because we normally see a lot of cetaceans. We have 100% success in watching cetaceans. In the last year, we have 100% success in watching cetaceans. In all our trips, we watch SeaUs. We don't have local animals resident in these areas. We normally see cetaceans which are in this area just for feeding. And this place is an amazing place to see whales. And we are lucky because in every trip, as I said, we always see whales. And we has become famous due to our success here in the Biscay Bay. We normally see between 27 and 28 different type of species in the Biscay Bay. Apart from the SeaUs we normally see in the 95% of our trips, it is a huge percentage, even more than in El Hierro Island. Here we can see three types of dolphins. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of sperm whales here, but for example, we see a lot of fin whales. We can see blue whales, sometimes sperm whales, male sperm whales. For example, we don't have resident sperm whales, just juveniles. We go out from July to October because in winter, although we can see some cetaceans, it is very, very cold and we don't have a lot of tourists. We can go out to see pelagic animals and we can see birds, and people coming during this period of the year are used to it and they are prepared. They bring a lot of coats because it is cold. And when we have children, grandparents, parents, this type of tourists usually come in summer with a good temperature, of course. Apart from all this success, for us it is very important to protect the environment and nature. This is our way of living, and the best way to protect the environment is to educate our clients, our adventurers. We call them adventurers because we want them to involve them in our activities. And we have some guidelines, and thanks to these guidelines, the World Cetacean Alliance, since we have joined this association some years ago, and we have been certified as a eco-friendly company. We have this behavior in our DNA, and we have been doing this in the last 10 years. We train our guides and we train our all our employers. We want them to teach tourists, and we want them to explain tourists what they are watching, how they can identify the animals in situ when they have the animals in front of them. The previous day, we always give a seminar, a 1-hour seminar, and this is a good way to involve people. We explain them what they can see, how they can identify the animals, how they can find them, and how they can protect them. Our motto is love and learn what we see, and learn and love what we see. If we know what we have nearby, we love what we have nearby. And this is what we do in our seminar. The main problem of these animals is the intake of plastics. And we explain tourists how they can use the plastics in their home, because we need to remember that 80% of the plastics we can see on the sea comes from our homes, and we need to change the situation. As we are now in the zero plastic campaign nowadays, if we collect in every trip, we collect all nets, all plastics we see on the sea, and we also collect the balloons of children. They are very funny, but they normally end on the sea, and they are usually eaten by the turtles our friend Susana loves. So we need to educate people. Apart from whale watching, we get closer to whales, but not too close. Here in Spain, it's totally forbidden to swim with whales. From here, please, in Norway, you must avoid people from swimming with these animals. They are wild animals, and if there is any accident, people are going to demonize these animals, and apart from that, the animals feel stressed too. So you must avoid these type of situations in Norway. Apart from our respect for the environment, we started this adventure with small vessels, with yachts, with 10 people, and now we have a catamaran with 480 people, but we are not full at all. We normally take 70% of our capacity, because we want people to feel comfortable and to enjoy the trip. With a bigger vessel, we know our CO2 emissions are important, and we try to compensate these CO2 emissions, and we try to compensate it by plant some trees in the Basque countries with NGOs. And this is our way to erase our CO2 footprint. And we also want our adventurers to do exactly the same. Last year was the first time we did it, and at least 100 people went to the mountains, and they started to plant trees. This is a short overview of our adventure. And we want everyone to collaborate and to join our activity. Thank you, Gorka. It's a great pleasure to talk with you. Very important, very interesting talk. I think this previous preparation is very important, not only a trip, but this 1 hour seminar is very important to educate people, to protect, to love, and to learn. I would also like to highlight your effort, not only carry out a whale watching activity, but also collecting plastics, especially all the nets, which are so dangerous for animals and for the. It's also very important, the creation of.
For Susana, there is someone who is asking regarding regulation. Are there some troubles with illegal boats in Azores?
Yeah, I saw the question. Well, luckily, usually no. I mean, of course, this is not perfect. It's not paradise. Sometimes there can be some problems even internally in terms of the whale watching companies with each other. I mean, it happens. It's not paradise, like I said. But with illegal boats, not a lot. Occasionally, we do have some sailing boats passing in the area where we're also watching the whales. And I mean, these people are just passing by, right? So it's there's no specific legislation for them to say it's forbidden. But most of the times, from what we've seen, they usually just slow down a bit. They also see the whales, but they continue. So it's not a big problem in the Azores, the illegal boats. Luckily, no.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Giovanna, this is for you. Yes, can you open the microphone? Okay, thank you. So there is a question that someone is asking you about what do you think about swimming with whales?
Yes, our position is actually that we are against any in-water activities. And I think that in a place, in a context where there are no governmental regulations, is quite clear. And as the director itself has admitted, that accident can happen. So it's strongly discouraged and to enter the water when there are wild animals in, as I've heard also in the last presentation.
Mm-hmm. And what about these two surfers that were catching by
yes.
whale?
Yes, it was like it was a surfer competition a bit southern from Tromsø. It was catch on video, so it went viral on the internet. So it seems that the orcas approached the two of the surfers that were quite close to the coast. It's very difficult to understand whether they were like curious or playing, or they were annoyed by the presence of the people in the water. There is no answer to that. Mm-hmm. But the point is that they got quite close to the surfers.
Uh-huh. And what do you think? I don't know, whatever of you, what do you think about drones? Is it necessary? Any recommendation, any regulation about drones?
Norway, it's there is the third set of guidelines regulate the use of air drones to observe the whales from above. But there is no regulations about in-water drones. Due to the weather conditions, they are not used because it's very difficult to control them. So at least at the moment, it's not a big problem. We had other problems, like a few years ago. It seems that people had started to consider jet skis, but then it disappeared. Maybe they were too expensive. So there are new problems coming up. It's incredible how creative people can be in order to get close to whales, putting themselves and their animals in danger. So it's no limit to this.
And I don't know if you, Susanna, have something to say about the drones or not?
Yes, here in the Azores, it's illegal to use drones on the normal whale watching tours, but it is possible to collect footage. So usually what happens is, for example, if you are a professional photographer or if you're trying to film a documentary, for example, you have to apply to a license passed by the local government, especially the Marine Affairs Regional Direction. And if they say it's okay, if your license passed, you pay for the license and then you can use the drones on the boat. But when you go out, you have to go out just with the crew that's going to film. You cannot have tourists mixed in. So it's completely illegal to use the drones on the whale watching tours, on the platforms. From land, no, but on the boats, yes, it's illegal unless you apply for the license and it's okay by the government.
Thank you, Susanna. We have another question for you, Susanna. This is about guiding boats on Azores. What are your recommendations to become a guide on board?
Well, it's easy. You have to have a boat license. That's very important. Specifically on our boats, we only have 2 people as crew members. So we both need to know how to drive. And then, well, that's the only like tick that you really need to have. But of course, we give preference to people who have experience. If you don't have any experience, we also provide some training. And it's usually important also to be fluent in several languages. I mean, English, of course, for sure. But then if you also speak Portuguese and Spanish and French and German, that helps a lot.
Great. Giovanna, please, what do you think, or what do you prefer between there is a guy from Iceland who is asking this question. He is asking about the difference, what do you prefer, whale watching or just watching? I don't know, the kind of words you must use to talk about whales, watching whales.
I'm not sure I understand. If I prefer to use what kind of whale watching I would recommend?
Is that the dichotomy, whale watching or whaling?
Okay, whaling, like
yes, sorry.
Whale hunting. Well, I prefer whale watching from land, but but I'm afraid that that's not the trend here. Norway is among the few countries that keep on whaling, and my personal opinion about this is that whaling is receiving quite a lot of money from the state, so it's not sustainable from an economic point of view. They're putting lots of money because it's more about tradition, and it's a bit a taboo to talk about whaling for foreigners here in Norway. So I would say that the whaling is a matter of national pride and traditions that are put in before the animal welfare. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And regarding the whaling industry, what do you think about the increasing activity of Norway related to whaling?
Well, whaling, whaling exists only because it's getting extra money, subsidy from the state. And well, for me, it's a kind of sad story, but but it seems that the Norwegians are very very proud of these traditions, and we might say that that's the same a bit all over the world, that some traditions are very hard to die.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's just training the people to love whales is the way to stop killing them?
Well, it's a big question. That's I'm not sure. I would like to say yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, Gorka.
Gorka, some questions for you. The first one, from Cantabria, Galicia, and Asturias. Can we practice whale watching in the whole north of Spain? I don't really know, because I don't know these places. In Galicia, I think this is a good place for whale watching, because in this place there are a good concentration of krills when whales are passing to the south of the planet, or when they go out from the Biscay Gulf. And I think this is a good place for whale watching, but I don't know which places are the best and which type of food they eat. In our place in the Biscay Gulf in Euskadi, this is a good place because we have anchovies, and this is like a candy for whales together for the krills, and it's a good place for watching fin whales and also for seafoos. So I don't really know what the situation truly is in other parts of the north of Spain. I know from other colleagues they have seen fin whales. Is exactly what happened in Gibraltar, but these whales are just passing by. They are not staying. But I think mostly in every place they can be seen. We have a guide from Iceland, and you have said there is a decrease in the pilot whales population. This is temporary. Yes, we are very worried about this situation because we haven't seen any pilot whale at all. Last year, in 2009, we saw them just once, and in 2008 we saw them 5 times, and I don't know in 2007, but only a few times. We have asked even our colleagues in Iparralde, in the south of France, Explorer Ocean, a company from Hendaya. I don't know if they have some resident population, but they usually see pilot whales, but they are living the same situation. There is a decrease in pilot whales. These individuals are moving in this area, but we don't know the origin of this decrease. We don't know if these pilot whales are coming from the north of Europe and they are going to the south, and we don't know if these population are being killed in the Faroe Island. We don't know what is happening. And these are the cetaceans which high interaction with people, and we are very worried. And we have a question, I don't know exactly what they mean. Which type of vessels are the most recommended? The big ones, the small ones? In Patagonia, for example, the ones you told us, big vessel with a small amount of people. So there is a prototype of vessels. What do you think, Gorka? It is important to have a big vessel because you have altitude and you have a higher probability to see a whale. If you have small vessels, you can see far away, so if you are higher, your probabilities are higher too. I was going to make a joke, but not at the moment. I think the higher vessels are better. A small vessel is okay because the amount of people is smaller and the price is good. Here in Euskadi, we spend at least 8 hours, as I already mentioned. When I started to work, we used 10 meters yacht, and we were just 10 people. And this is ideal. I don't own a vessel. I will need to rent one, and I wouldn't earn a lot. So if I have a big vessel, the price of the ticket will be cheaper. So even if the price is cheaper, families and many people would like to come here to my company. Thank you, Gorka.
The question, there is
Yes.
someone asking about the big boats or the small boats as a rubber boat you keep using. So what do you think about this kind of boat? Is better or?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, because if you have a smaller boat, that's ideal. You can have a better experience with the animal. You can also take care of the people on the boat a bit better, because if I only have 12 clients, it's completely different than having 300. But if I have 20 small boats where I could have just one bigger boat with more people, of course, then maybe I would go for the bigger boats. So it's a balance between the number of boats that are actually in the area. But if fewer boats, then I think smaller boats are better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is a question for all of you. What is the great challenge for this kind of activity, the whale watching, for you, for your companies, or maybe for you, whale watcher? What is the big challenge?
That's an easy question. For me, the biggest challenge is to manage the client's expectations, for sure. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure that the people understand that these are wild animals. They are not there to be seen by you. They are doing their own life. They are sometimes mating, sometimes feeding, sometimes resting. And it's very important to know that when you go out, if you are disturbing them, if they exhibit a behavior that clearly shows that they're being disturbed, I'm sorry, I know you really want to see the whale, but it's time to go, okay? And to manage that expectation on the client's behalf, because they paid and they want to to have the best experience of their lives. Of course, they want to see the whale jumping. Everybody wants to see that. But to try to put them in the lowest expectation possible before they go out. So wherever they see it's the best thing in the world, that for me, it's the biggest challenge that we face.
Thank you. What about you, Joanna? What do you think?
Well, I agree with what Susanna said, and I think the biggest challenges is irresponsible whale watchers, and yeah, to manage the expectations. And our digital ego want to take nice pictures and share this on social media is a huge challenge. So it's a bit the same thing that Susanna said.
Okay, thank you. And Gorka, ¿tú qué piensas?
And Gorka, what do you think, which is the most difficult challenge for a whale watching company nowadays? Well, to make clients happy. Our clients are very demanding, and with this pandemic situation, even more. They are always angry, and they are very, very demanding. We need to teach them, and we need to insist on, especially the previous day. So this is why these previous talks are essential. We explain them this is not a zoo, they are wild animal. Maybe we can see them, or maybe we cannot see them, unfortunately, and we need to respect them. So for people who love these animals, for us it is easy to understand. But for example, for people who are just thinking about making money, they want, well, we are doing a hen party, and we are doing any other activities just to make money. The most important thing is to respect these animals. We are intruders in their environment, and we need to respect them. And people must understand this. Not everyone can do this activity. We need to explain people about that. Thank you very much.
Question. So I will request you some short words about 2-3 questions that we don't know to leave out without reply. So first of all, we have one of our most interesting person during this Congress is Eric Hoyt. He's saying that very great presentation, but he's asking you, what about the COVID? What are you doing? You are rethinking the activity, you are working on water as always. What are you doing during this time? Susanna or Giovanna, please.
Okay, well, during the pandemic, we had to stop operating. I mean, because of the restrictions by the government. So usually our season starts in March, and we only started to operate almost at the end of June. Well, then we continued, but not, of course, not as normal. We had to restrict even more the number of people on the boat. For example, instead of 12, we could only take 8 to make sure that the distance within people on the boat was being obliged. So it was very difficult to adapt our conditions to this pandemic. And from what we're thinking of the future, it's going to continue. Like, the virus is not going to go away just like that. And even with the vaccine, I mean, even if it works, it's going to take some time. So of course we had to adapt a little bit this activity, mostly because of the government restrictions. And even though it was bad because we couldn't get as much money as we would usually get in a normal season, for me personally, I actually think it benefits the animals a bit, because we had a lot less boats in the water, a lot less pressure, and the type of clients that came here were also clients that were accepting the fact that this activity also has an impact in the animals. So actually to reduce that during the virus was actually good on the environment, it was good on the animals. Economically, of course, it's not the best for the companies. But I think we will be able to find a balance in between in the future.
Susanna. What about you, Giovanna? What do you think? You keep doing the same? You have changed something because of the COVID, or?
Well, the operators, there are very few tourists, international tourists. They are actually absent. So whale watching can appeal to Norwegian tourists coming from the south, but in general, the tourist companies are not working a lot, and some of them are closing. So yeah, there's not going to be many whale watching tours. As long as I know, there is one operator that is trying at least to arrange some kind of virtual tours. But I don't know how things will develop. Also because, as Mario explained at the beginning, we don't know if the whales come back every year and in which area. So we cannot really count on whales coming every year and be so many as at the beginning of this. So it's lots of question marks.
Thank you so much, Giovanna. And Gorka, bueno, tenemos a Eric Hoyt, una eminencia.
Gorka, tenemos a Eric Hoyt, que es it is a very important a person for whale watching, and he's very happy for your slides and a challenge. In the last season, due to this COVID situation, are you thinking about the next season? Are you thinking in changing your activity? Yes, people in general, I think they are angry, they are more demanding, but in general, I think people understand, people are nervous because of the job, but our trips are the same despite of the COVID. Our tourists have been national tourists, but yes, we need to strengthen our staff in order for tourists to wear face masks, for example. We want them to have a nice trip, but apart from that, just to everyone take care, and next year I hope we can see each other on the sea. Thank you, Gorka, Giovanna, Susana, Mario. Just one word I've learned: Klondike. We have been in unique places with unique people. This has been an amazing experience. And thank you. Tomorrow we will see each other again. And we are going about the ecotourism product. We are going to have a round table of this ecotourist. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow. Muchas gracias.